My name's Jason. Run a company called Japanese Knotweed Expert. We specialise in the remediation and report writing of invasive weeds in the UK. Specifically Japanese knotweed, but other other invasive weeds as well, such as giant hogweed is one that's quite prevalent, but nowhere near as dangerous really to properties as Japanese knotweed. We were one of the first 5 companies in the entire UK that were qualified to the highest level, so we do a lot of work for mortgage companies, and because of our qualifications we are often commissioned to write Part 35 compliant reports, which we'll touch on a little bit later. They are the type of report that a judge reads when somebody's being sued over Japanese knotweed. The relevance to you guys is normally it's the surveyor that's being sued. Brilliant, okay. So we're going to be discussing how we're going to identify it, legal and financial implications of Japanese knotweed. Whenever I say that, everybody goes, yeah, it's horrific, you know. Financially, it's going to devastate the value of the property. Don't touch it with a barge pole. We're going to look at that in quite some depth actually over the next hour and 15 minutes. And that's really good value for you guys because you get 2 hours for your CPD training off an hour and 15 minutes, which is that the way you guys charge as well? Yeah. So we've got a number of qualifications, ISOs and so forth, but also because we deal with the remediation of Japanese knotweed, I'm going to turn this around actually. We also obviously are out on the coal face like most of you. I think there's only one architect in the room apart from the speakers. Obviously you guys are on the coal face looking at properties, identifying potential issues that will affect the value. So we also physically get out there and deal with the Japanese knotweed. We put members of the PCA, which is a governing body for our type of work. So basically what this means to you guys is that we are experts in our field, we're professional, and something that we don't need to do but we absolutely think is imperative is we give great customer service. One of the things, and I'll mention it now because last week I completely forgot to mention it, make sure you take a brochure at the back and take the email or a phone number off the brochure and save it into your phones. Free of charge, completely free of charge. If you ever come to a property and you're looking at something and thinking, you know what, I think it's Japanese knotweed, but I'm just not sure. Snap a picture, and generally speaking, within 5 minutes, you'll have a reply back saying, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. Completely free of charge. The benefit to us is that if it is, hopefully we'll get a job out of it. And if it isn't, it's no big deal. We've looked after you guys, and hopefully in the future, when Japanese knotweed does turn up, you'll be able to recommend us and refer us. But it makes you way more professional. Because if you can say with certainty, that's Japanese knotweed, this is an issue, and then you can obviously put that in your report, or vice versa. You look at it and you think, is it, isn't it? And then you get a message back saying, no, that's not Japanese knotweed, it's Rubix blissiflorus or something like that, which is quite commonly mistaken as Japanese knotweed. It'll mean, again, you look like an expert. You are the expert to that client, to that person you're valuing the property for.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Of course.
I mean, what happens if you get it wrong? You say it's not Japanese knotweed.
Yeah.
We then report back.
Report back.
We get sued because of the advice you've given us.
Well, we've got professional indemnity insurance as well, and they'll probably come and sue us because we told you it wasn't. So
you would take on that responsibility?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Totally. If we're not sure, you might get a phone call back, especially if you send it off your mobile, which I'm assuming you would do. Say, look, can you take another picture, please? We want a close up of the leaf, or we want a close up of the stem. Or I was speaking to the young lady at the back. We might even say, can you just uncover it, just scrape away this soil with your boots and let me just look at the roots and take a picture of that. And to be honest, occasionally, probably 1 in 10, 1 in 15, we'll just literally come back to you and say, look, we're really sorry, we can't tell from those pictures. It might be so immature that we physically can't tell. And we'll tell you that, in which case it'll need somebody to come out. But we'll touch on that later as well, because that's when you put in your report, dead simple phrase of, there's a weed, there's a plant in your garden that resembles Japanese knotweed and therefore needs to be investigated by a botanist, environmentalist, or somebody like ourselves. But we'll be completely upfront with you. And because the office is open 7:15 in the morning to 5:30, I'm pretty sure most of you don't work outside those hours anyway. So we will be able to help you out and we'll deal with it. So we deal with a number of companies. construction firms, small and large, architects, solicitors, accountants, and we'll touch on accountants later, but we also deal significantly with a wide range of surveyors, both sole traders and groups where it's a whole practice. And we're happy to deal with it with all of you. We like it. We like the only surveyors. They're normally very professional. What we want to really do today is, well, but actually, before we go on to that, what would you guys, because we've only got a small group or so, 20, it would be nice if I can tailor it in the next hour and 2 minutes to you guys. Most of you are surveyors. We've got an architect. Is there anything specific you'd like to pull out of the next hour that would benefit you guys? Yeah.
What it looks like actually when you see, I look at a buy-to-let property, I want to buy for myself.
Yes.
I took a photograph to show you today, and,
Yeah.
and I think it might be, the stems are red, it looks like bamboo cane, red and green,
Right, okay.
the leaves, and I think that to me looks like Japanese knotweed.
It would be great maybe if we could maybe have a look at that picture, because that's a real life example then, and it'll be an example of the type of stuff that gets sent to us, I'm absolutely sure. So how to identify it, we cover that definitely. In the Japanese knotweed one, the green brochure, there's 2 brochures actually that I'd like you to take away today. One's Japanese knotweed, and the other one's, the one at the back, is called ProHort, which is our sister company, and that deals predominantly with services that architects find really useful. But for you guys, it'll have some services in there that will supplement what you do. Anything else? Yeah.
I have a query at the moment where I've been asked whether an adjoining owner, what are the obligations on an adjoining owner who has knotweed into preventing that transferring over into or onto your owner?
Okay, I'll answer it very quickly, but we'll touch on it later.
Yeah.
It is illegal to allow his Japanese knotweed cross the boundary into your property.
Right.
And we'll touch on this later. There's been a number of legal cases, in particular the one where it was Wastrel versus Network Rail, which effectively, from what the judge has said, it's really made it illegal to have Japanese knotweed, although that's not wrote into the law of the land at the moment.
Right.
But that's what he's basically impugned in his judgment.
Okay.
The architect, is there anything specifically you'd like to pull out from today?
Just what it looks like.
Just what it looks like. Fantastic. That's great. Right, so we will be looking at what it looks like. We'll also look at Japanese knotweed and how it affects proposed developments and also ongoing developments and value of property as well. So, because they're the 3 bits. And it's, obviously today we're going to tailor it mostly to you guys. When you're valuing a property, you are viewed as the experts. You are the experts, really. So it is important that you can identify Japanese knotweed. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is, basically, we want you guys to avoid having legal action taken against you for either missing it or misidentifying it. And just because it's good practice, we want to avoid it spreading further and further and becoming even a greater problem. You know, Japanese knotweed, there's a great thing I read in the paper. When they did the development of the Olympic Park, do you remember a few years back? Well, more than a decade now. In the newspaper it said, they quoted the guy that was in charge of the whole project. And he said, we found World War II ordnance. We found Japanese knotweed. We can deal with the bombs. Has anybody, you know, and that really does typify how difficult Japanese knotweed is to deal with. Does anybody have any idea of how much it actually cost to remediate the Olympic Park site of Japanese knotweed? You architects aren't allowed to answer because you heard the answer last week. Go on, hazard a guess. We can start a bidding auction.
Tens of millions.
Tens of millions. So you're going for, let's say, 15 million. Any advance on 15 million? Or less? Oh, you know, come on, guys. It cost £70 million to remediate the whole Olympic Park and the site. Unfortunately, I didn't get that job. I probably wouldn't be stood here today if I did. Probably on a nice beach somewhere in the Seychelles. But we are talking serious money. We really are. And it's interesting as well that a significant number of phone calls we get are to do with a surveyor that has missed Japanese knotweed. So it is really important that you guys pick this up, because we are talking serious money. We really are. Architects and construction companies, although we've only got one in the room plus the speakers, it is really useful for you guys to be able to identify it. And the reason why is, just like you surveyors, it shows good practice, it shows good knowledge, but also dealing with it, especially on a potential new build. I don't know if any of you surveyors have to value land or for potentially building property like brownfield sites and stuff. Is that anything any of you get into, or is it predominantly just the houses itself? Just the houses. Cool, no, that's fine, that's absolutely fine. We do a lot of work all over the UK, but certainly in Derby, most of that is Japanese knotweed growing in the backs of terraced houses. So again, it's absolutely vital that you can find it. So, what is it? This is actually a job in Stoke-on-Trent. The tenant, she was only small, she was only 5'5". That's the Japanese knotweed though. Significant, isn't it? Now, it was a particularly big one. Normally you're looking at about 2.5, 2.7 metres tall, but that was massive. It really was. And the stand, the base, was, well, you couldn't get your arms around it, the rhizomes and stuff. And it does show how quite huge it can grow. It's a perennial, so that means that actually in the winter it dies down. So come October it'll start losing its leaves and it'll literally just die off. But you'll be left with the brown stems. What's also interesting is that picture was taken at the beginning of June. So in February, March time, there was nothing visible. So it's got to that height, 4 metres or so plus, in just literally 12 weeks. You can literally see it grow. Last year, it was actually this time of the year, we just had the bank holiday weekend. We'd actually been and surveyed the next door but one's neighbour. And they've got Japanese knotweed coming in from the field at the back. And the woman phoned me up, quite distressed really, on the Tuesday morning, and said, I've got Japanese knotweed. And we said, well, where do you live? Why do you think it is? And she'd literally weeded and hoed her garden. It was only a courtyard garden, so it was only small, on the Friday. She went back in her garden on the Monday and to sit out in it and enjoy it, and the Japanese knotweed was literally 6 inches tall. When I got there, which was the Wednesday, it was almost 8 inches. And she said she swore blind it was not there on the Friday. So we are talking about something that can grow very, very quickly. Introduced by the Victorians as a specimen plant. And it's a lovely plant. You know, large, creates a pseudo woodland, ideal for things like dormice, voles, that type of thing. Also, the flowers that it produces are quite lovely. High in pollen at the end of the year, so the bees love it. So it has got an advantage for wildlife and some insects. It was popular with the landscapers back in the 18th century. Can grow up to 4 metres. This is an interesting point. It produces seed, but the seed is not viable. So it cannot, you know, like buddleias spring up everywhere? Japanese knotweed can only be reproduced by a section of either the stem, which has to contain 2 nodules, one to produce the new leaf, one to produce the root, and that's unlikely. Unless somebody's attacked it with a stribber, that doesn't happen very often. But the rhizome, you only need the size of your thumbnail to produce a new plant, and that's how it normally gets reproduced. Fly tipping is very common, edge of brownfield sites where it's just dumped. And we also see quite a lot of badgers and foxes move it. We looked at one near Nottingham actually earlier this week, and we think the guys, it was literally middle of an estate, Japanese knotweed, none in any of the neighbouring gardens, says it had been there since he bought the house, never really given it any much thought. And I said, well, it's quite unusual because, you know, I'm trying to work out how it's got here. I said, do you have any animals coming through? He goes, oh yeah, we have foxes come through most nights. And that's how we think it's got there. We had one up in Bollington near Macclesfield where the Japanese knotweed was over 2 miles away and badgers had brought it in to the garden. It was stuck in the claws. There was a small stream that ran through the garden and they used to dig there most nights for worms and grubs and stuff, and we think it had literally been deposited, come out of the claws and just taken root and away it went. So that is definitely a way that it can be moved around the environment. Can remain dormant for up to 20 years, which can prove difficult therefore to deal with. We've never seen it remain dormant for more than 5 years. We've never had a case where it's gone past the 5-year mark and then we've been called out, because we have to guarantee all our work for 10 years. Here's an interesting slide. 1800s, Kew Gardens, the first registered plant brought into the UK, sent there as an example and named. Tens of thousands of sites of Japanese knotweed just in the UK. Estimated cost to remediate Japanese knotweed in the UK, £3 billion. So a significant chunk of money again. Have any of you guys seen Japanese knotweed in any of those situations? Yeah, yeah. Japanese knotweed is a first coloniser of volcanoes. So what that means is basically volcano explodes, magma runs around down the hill, buries the Japanese knotweed, and Japanese knotweed is burnt and looks, in all intents and purposes, buried by magma. Anybody would think anything would be dead with those conditions. It then literally comes, because the roots can be up to 3 metres deep and up to 7 metres in any direction, it then literally grows through the magma and breaks the magma apart and colonises the side of the volcano, which is amazing. So when you think about tarmac, retaining walls, etc., a little bit of concrete, it really doesn't have much of an effect on it. That said, it is rare, and it is rare, it has happened, I've seen it happen, but it's rare for Japanese knotweed to grow straight through a concrete pad. It will not normally look, if it's concrete sections, it will normally grow through the break line where they've put a crack in it, put a still saw in it to make sure there's no subside, no movement. It will normally come through here. This job here was in Newcastle under Lyme. That was a reinforced poured concrete wall. That was the break in it. And it literally, you can't tell from that picture, but it literally pushed it apart 35 mil. Which is, again, I wouldn't like to try and push that concrete steel apart, but it literally pushed it apart. It was a Travis Perkins site. They've got all building materials. I think you can see some stuff just there. But literally, and then grown all the way, it was on top of the wall and growing through the wall. And there was a little bit that had literally got underneath the wall and was coming up just over here.
I've seen it like bottom right there in Benfleet in Essex.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing.
Coming straight through the tarmac.
Yeah.
Tarmac really doesn't even concern it, not even one iota.
No.
So,
Exactly.
and it will literally, and it will rip it up super fast as well. It really will. So, a video. Identifying Japanese knotweed. JJ, is this where you come in? So we're going to have a little video now on how to identify it, which is obviously seems to be one of the key things that you guys wanted to talk about.
Is it more common in any particular part of England, or is it just is it nationwide?
It's pretty well nationwide. We've done jobs from up in the Lake District. We've done ones down in Cornwall and Devon. But yeah, I'd like to say that you see it a lot on brownfield sites and near brownfield sites, but we do see it everywhere. We've seen it in the middle of the countryside, really idyllic spots where it's been growing in somebody's garden. And we've seen it in, the back of, terraced houses where you think, you couldn't pay me to live here. So it does literally get everywhere. We've seen it in multi-million-pound homes where at the end of the gardens, and where there's been substantial stands. We have seen it absolutely everywhere, and it's becoming, I don't know if it's becoming more rife or if it's just, I think people are more aware of it now. While JJ's sorting out that, it might be an ideal opportunity to talk about how it affects valuation of property. How do you guys, value properties with Japanese knotweed?
With difficulty.
With difficulty, yeah, there is definitely. There doesn't seem to be a lot of clear guidelines on it. Anybody, because we've got a surveyor in Stoke-on-Trent that regularly will devalue it by 50%. I went to a job 6 months ago in Birmingham where the surveyor had said, I'm not going to give a value for the house, I don't think it's got any value because we can't mortgage it, it was a mid-terrace, it had got Japanese knotweed. Says, you won't be able to get a mortgage on this. And therefore, effectively, it turned it from £80,000 terraced to somewhere in the region of 40,000. They were going to have to put it through an auction and it was having to be a cash buyer. So it is a difficult one for you guys. We've had a few cases that have gone through where typically it was a 50% devaluation. There's no question about it. That we saw a lot of that for a number of years. We seem to be finding now we're getting between 5 and 10% devaluations, depending on the cost of the remediation. So if the cost of the remediation is, let's say, £5,000, what do you think? Why do you think people are having 10, 15, 20,000 pounds knocked off their houses?
Stigma.
Yeah, exactly. Because the value of the property, and you guys will know better than I will, is dictated by what a person will pay for the house. And if they've got 10, 20 terraced houses,
Here we go.
do you just press pause and we'll just finish this part of the conversation first and then we'll have a look at that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Fab, thanks. And that's exactly the issue. If they can buy 10 different terraced houses that all look virtually identical, but one has Japanese knotweed and the other 9 don't, well, why would they choose that one? All of that said, we've got a group of clients in Crewe in Cheshire that buy properties and look for properties with Japanese knotweed. I'll tell you about their market. What they do, dead simple, is they will go out and look for properties with Japanese knotweed. They will then offer them, normally terraced houses, £20,000 to £25,000 less than the market value. And they'll get somebody like us in to write a report and say, right, Japanese knotweed, definitely in the property, or you're going to struggle getting a mortgage, etc. And they will basically buy the property for 20 grand below market price. Typically, on a private residential house, the price for remediating Japanese knotweed is 5 grand or less. So they then pay us the money to remediate it. We issue 10-year insurance-backed guarantees, and we fill out all the paperwork that's necessary for the mortgage. So they can actually they do raise a mortgage on the property. What they then do is then they rent it for 5 to 10 years, and then they then sell it at market value. For the 5-year ones, they've still got 5 years of the 10-year insurance-backed guarantee in place. The Japanese knotweed is completely gone. So, and because if there's 2 years of no Japanese knotweed, we can declare it free of Japanese knotweed, so they don't even have to declare it when they're trying to sell it, because it's already gone. And they get full market value, so 20 grand or so, and they've had a tenant paying the mortgage for the last 5 years.
Haven't they got a duty to declare the presence of Japanese knotweed on pre-contract inquiries though?
No. And I say no really positively then, and it is absolutely, it's a really grey area, because you've got some solicitors that say even if this property has no Japanese knotweed now and it's been cleared and there is no sign of any Japanese knotweed for the last 2 years, which is what we have to say, basically we're allowed to say it's clear of Japanese knotweed if there's been no sign of it for 2 years. Some solicitors say you still have to declare it, that it was there 5 years ago. Other solicitors are absolutely not. You've just told me there's no Japanese knotweed there. Why do I have to say that there was 5 years ago or 10 years ago? We actually had one, the young lady said she worked for Savills. There was a Savills in Stafford. There was Japanese knotweed on the property 20 years before, and they'd had it dug out and removed from site 20 years ago when they'd had the house built. Beautiful house set in the countryside, really nice. And Savills put that the property had been affected by Japanese knotweed, and for 8 months they didn't get one inquiry because they didn't put any more details than that, and it was a right palaver getting them to take it off even the description of the property. But there was no Japanese knotweed there. It had never been there. They'd never seen it, and since it had been dug out. So yeah, it is really quite interesting to deal with that.
Okay.
Go on, go for it. So this is how to identify it. Hi, my name's Jason Harker and I'm a PCA qualified surveyor. And today what we're going to be doing is identifying Japanese knotweed, also known as Fallopian japonica. So a really good way of identifying Japanese knotweed is by how quickly it grows. It can grow up to 40 mil every single day. And as you can see here, this Japanese knotweed is 8 to 10 foot tall, and this has all grown since April, May this year, and we're only halfway through August. So another really good way of identifying Japanese knotweed are the stems. As you can see here, the stems are a green colour, and then they've got these purple speckles on them, and this is a really nice clear way of identifying them. What you can also do is if we cut them in two, what you'd find is that they would be hollow in the middle. So as you can see, they're almost like pieces of bamboo. What you've then also got is what's commonly described as a heart-shaped leaf. So as you can see, it comes to a point, and it's quite flat here, so it's described often as heart-shaped or shield-shaped. Well, one of the final ways of identifying Japanese knotweed is how it grows. And if you can see, it grows in a zigzag motion. So it literally zigzags from one point to the next point up to each leaf node, and that's also a nice way of identifying Japanese knotweed. The final way of identifying Japanese knotweed is the rhizome itself. This is the part that actually causes all the damage. So if we pull up a piece, as you can see, you have this very noticeable orange carrot coloured tint to the root. So if you think you've identified Japanese knotweed in your garden, then the first thing to do is not to disturb it. It only takes a piece of the root or the rhizome the size of your thumbnail to produce a new plant. If you're still not sure if it is Japanese knotweed, then why not take a picture and send it to us, and we'll normally identify it within a couple of hours to give you either peace of mind or to give you the bad news.
One thing that concerns me about
Yes.
this stuff is it grows so rapidly.
Yes.
When we go out and do our survey,
Yeah.
there might be no sign of it whatsoever.
Absolutely.
But then, 6 months later, 2 years later,
Yeah.
3 years later,
Yeah.
we could get a claim against us.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually had a situation like that up in Grantham,
Yeah.
where there was Japanese knotweed in the front garden, a little strip of garden in
Yeah.
front of a terraced house.
Yes.
Fortunately, one of my photographs showed that exact area.
Yeah.
There was no sign of anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, my view was that the vendor knew what he'd got,
And chopped it.
had chopped it below ground level and
Yeah.
put pebble, gravel
Gravel.
down
Yeah.
to conceal it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I was able to defend myself by just saying, look, here's a photograph, no sign of it whatsoever. I suggest that the vendor probably, concealed that.
Yeah.
And it just went away. I heard no more about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is worrying, isn't it? I was lucky that I just happened to have that photograph. You can't necessarily take photographs of everything, can you?
No, and it is a difficult one, but I think what you've said there is absolutely right. Photographs, evidence that you're doing a proper job is vital. And I think that is something that with digital cameras these days, you can literally, it's not costing you film or anything, you can literally go round and take multiple snaps. And that's really a key way of protecting yourselves. We had a job in Biddulph, Stoke-on-Trent. Absolutely 100% the previous owner had cut it down and disguised any sign of it in the garden. No question about it. The surveyor still got sued and lost. And I'll tell you why. Because he'd taken pictures of the garden, which showed no Japanese knotweed. But the guidelines for the surveyors is, and again you guys already know this, is that you're meant to go and do a first floor window and survey and just look around the surrounding gardens over the tops of fences. And unfortunately, what he'd missed wasn't, because there's no possible way he would have known there was Japanese knotweed in that garden. There's no possible way. But literally the fence line was here, house was probably there, and the fence ran down the side, and literally over the top of the fence was Japanese knotweed growing in the neighbour's garden. I was called in March, April time, and it was all just coming through the lawn at that point. But this was last year's stems, standing 8-9 foot tall in the neighbour's garden, and he should have identified the fact there was Japanese knotweed in the neighbour's garden, and that's why he lost the case, because he hadn't done that. The fact that there was no evidence of Japanese knotweed in the garden, absolutely. If that hadn't been there, he would have he would have been fine. But it was there, it was visible. February, March, when I came, well, March, April, when I came out to survey it, it was there, literally stood. It's the first thing I noticed, but I even got down to the garden and actually saw them coming through the lawn. So taking pictures is absolutely vital, because if the person has done that, and there's plenty that do it. We had another one up near Chester, and that was big. That was about 300 square metres of Japanese knotweed, and the previous beautiful house, £1.5 million house, and the previous owners had put on their TR7 form, yeah, no Japanese knotweed. The new owners retained the existing gardener. Existing gardener was like, oh yeah, I told them they'd got Japanese knotweed, I told them that they had to get it sorted. I was like, ah, can you just sign here just to say that you've just said that? And he did sue the previous owners for the devaluation and the remediation costs of that Japanese knotweed. But they swore blind they hadn't got Japanese knotweed and they didn't do anything about it. But he won that case because they got a third party that was like, yeah, I told them specifically you've got Japanese knotweed there. And like I say, it was about 300 square metres worth. I mean, it was a big plot, it was about 3 acre plot, but it was right at the front, in and out drive, and it was in between the in and out drive. So again, that wasn't, but the surveyor, he didn't have any, he wasn't even attacked at all in that particular case. And the reason why, again, was he took photos. And because they bought the house over the winter, and the surveyor did his thing over the winter, he actually had a photo of the area, and they'd cut everything down. It was all gone. It was just like a rough grassed area. So again, the surveyor, he was in the clear because he'd had a good look round. There was no visible signs of Japanese knotweed, because you're not expected to get a spade out and start digging for roots. You just not expect that'd be ludicrous. So it's just a matter of pictures, in my opinion, are probably one of the key ways. It's probably one of 2 key ways you can protect yourselves, and we'll talk about the second in a little bit. In your Japanese, I think in your handout and in the green brochure, there's some pictures of what Japanese knotweed looks like. So this is what Japanese knotweed looks like in the spring, often described as asparagus-like. Now we're actually past this stage now, unless it's been treated with weed killer last year, which inhibits the growth. Comes through, new growth, quite reddish, purplish, and like asparagus, if any of you have ever grown it, and grows quickly. The leaves do not begin to unfurl until a couple of weeks. It literally just grows up like a spike. The new shoots are red and purple. And then in the summer, it's completely different from that initial picture. So we are looking at something now, we're expecting this time of the year, we see it about 5 foot tall already. Keeping in mind, a month ago, it wasn't even visible, apart from the stems from last year. Described as, on the video, remember, heart or shield-shaped leaf. Typically, the size of your palm is not unusual. That's quite normal. Single vein down the middle. This one shows the flowers in late summer, and as I said earlier, the bees love it because they are high in pollen. The stem, if you snap the stem in 2, it is hollow down the middle. Kids used to use it as pea shooters or like swords, which isn't quite nice. Autumn, because it's a perennial, remember perennials die back in the autumn winter, so its leaves turn yellowy brown and drop off. That simple. And by normally early December, pretty well they've lost all the leaves. And then what it looks like is this. And this is quite interesting because they will stay around. So this year's stems will stay around for about 18 months and up to 2 years if there's nothing really going through the area. So that's a way of identifying Japanese knotweed in the middle of winter. They have these brown stems that will quite often stand 2.5 metres tall quite easily, and they'll stay up for 2 winters if they're not knocked down by the client or by the homeowner. They are quite strong and often described as bamboo-like as well, because they are, you know, if you get one that's like a 10-year-old plant, it'll be easily, you know, 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. 1.5 is not unusual, and so it's you know, it's over the knee type break. It's not just a snap like that. But yeah, like I say, hollow down the middle. Another video, JJ. He's engrossed in reading the brochure. So this video talks about how we treat it, and you might think, well, why on earth do I know how to treat it? But again, it's you are looked at, you are viewed as the experts. So, you know, if you're saying, yes, it's Japanese knotweed, and the customer says, well, how's it going to be treated? It's nice just to have a little bit of an overview of, look, it's going to be, and typically you're looking at a 3-year program, you're looking at 5 to 6 treatments in year 1, and most of the time, not all of the time, if it's less than 5 years old, the Japanese knotweed, we can normally kill it off in year 1. We use 2 different types of herbicide. One is 300 times stronger than what's available to the public. The other one isn't available to the public at all. And this video really shows how we apply that herbicide. All of our work has to have a 10-year insurance-backed guarantee with it as well. Hi, my name's Jason Harker and I'm from the Japanese Knotweed Expert. Today we're going to talk about how we kill Japanese knotweed. So we do that through either spraying or injecting. Now you might be wondering why I'm wearing this ridiculous outfit. Well, the reason for that is the chemicals we normally use are 300 times stronger than what you can buy. So we obviously have the rubber gloves, we've got the whole outfit, Wellingtons, and the obligatory face mask. Now for the purpose of today, we're actually only using water, so I won't be using the face mask. This is a typical sprayer that we use, and what we normally do is when we're spraying, obviously I've got it on the back normally, but we'll be spraying the tops of the leaves, the underneath of the leaves, and the stems. The other thing to point out is that we want to be covering the entire plant. Now, when we say cover, we're not talking about saturating it so the weed killer is dripping off the leaves. Each leaf needs to be covered with a nice even film so it can be absorbed. Also, today would not be a suitable day for spraying because it's raining. You want to do it on a nice, dry, ideally sunny day so the plant is actively respiring and it can absorb the herbicide. The other way that we tend to kill Japanese knotweed is by using our Japanese knotweed gum. And here it is, really good piece of kit. It provides a dosage, a calibrated dosage straight into the plant for, well, it works really, really well for killing it off. Now, if you come here, I'll show you how we do it. Again, like I said earlier, it's only got water in, but effectively we're counting 2 nodules up, and then we inject it. And we literally push it straight in, and we'll give it 1 squeeze, and it gives it the calibrated dosage. And then we pull out. And that's how we probably deal with 98% of the cases of Japanese knotweed that we come across, either through spraying or injecting. The other 2% are effectively digging it out, but that can be quite well, it can be very expensive, to be honest. Because a plant like this, an established stand, you'd expect the roots to be in approximately 7 metres in all directions. They could also be up to 3 metres deep, which means that the roots will be underneath the garage, they'd be underneath this fence, they'd be everywhere. It would be an absolute nightmare, and we'd have to get a digger in to dig it all out, so that would obviously be quite expensive. That's why most people choose the herbicide method. So if you do have Japanese knotweed and you want some help dealing with it, then please feel free to get in touch with us. We'd look forward to hearing from you. Has anybody got any idea why people would choose to excavate Japanese knotweed rather than spray it? Because there is a really good reason for choosing that option. It's quicker and significantly more expensive. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you've got to remember that Japanese knotweed is classed as hazardous waste. So,
Oh, it's going to be something else on the thing, isn't it?
Close it down quick.
How is it disposed of then?
So, because it's hazardous waste, there's a number of ways of disposing of it. You can send it to a licensed landfill site, but keeping in mind that soil, inert waste, rubble, that type of thing, you'd be normally expecting to pay around 12, at a push £15 a tonne, depending on where you are in the UK. Obviously London, way more expensive, but for the rest of us, about 12 to £15 a tonne. For Japanese knotweed contaminated waste, you're looking at between 100 and 120 pounds per tonne. Now, you might think, well, okay, that's fair enough, I'll dig out a couple of tonnes, job's good, it's only a couple of £100, it's no big deal. But it's not. Because if you remember on the video, it said how the roots can be up to 3 metres deep and up to 7 metres in any direction. So if we turn around and take the gentleman in the back on the camera as an example, if the Japanese knotweed was there, this whole room has to go. because we're looking at 7 metres in that direction, we're looking at 7 metres in this direction, down here and that, and we're looking up to 3 metres deep. Well, if we keep it simple, and let's say it didn't spread that far, let's say it only spread 5 metres and it was only 2 metres deep. So that's 5 by 5, that's 25 square metres, 2 metres deep, so we're up to 50 cubic metres. Now, as you know, a cubic metre of soil is roughly 1.8 tonnes to 2 tonnes, depending on what type of soil it is. So you're looking, let's call it simple, keep it simple again, 2 tonnes per cubic metre. You're up to 100 tonnes for 1 square metre of Japanese knotweed. 100 tonnes at £100 per square metre. You're looking at 10 grand just for the dumping cost. That's not including somebody to supervise it. That's not including the dumper driver on £50 an hour. That's not including the dumper or the digger. You know, you are looking at a big chunk of money. Now, in reality, it might not be 5 metres in each way. It might only be 3 metres this way. It might only be 3 metres that way. It might only be 2 metres that way. It might only be 4 metres that way. And it might only be 1.5 metres deep. But we're still talking about significant amount of money. When you would say, typically for maybe a metre square, you might be looking at only 2 grand for a chemical treatment option over 3 years with a 10-year insurance back guarantee.
But does the spray then kill the roots?
So it's classed as a systemic spray. So it's absorbed by the leaves, goes through the stomata, and then travels throughout the stems and the rhizomes. Because killing the stems is actually quite easy, but yes, it literally travels into the rhizomes and can kill it off. But we have to kill it off because we have to guarantee our work for 10 years. You know, we don't make any money if we're going back year 4, year 5, year 7, you know, carrying on spraying it. We'd be bankrupt as a company. So, so the idea is that we kill it off as quickly as possible. And when you're applying the spray, there are factors to take into mind. The weather, you know, ideally, like a day like today, dry, sunny, not really any breeze, absolutely perfect. You want that plant to be respiring actively, but also the timing of the sprays. You can spray it in the spring and summer, but the absolute best time to spray it is late summer, early autumn. And again, this is because it's a perennial. So at this time of the year, everything's coming up. It's growing upwards, it's growing vertical. Whereas come up mid-August onwards, everything's being pulled from the plant back down into the rhizome to store that food and nourishment ready for next year's growth. So you're actually working with the plant when you start spraying and injecting at that time rather than fighting against it.
When you spray it, what happens to you kill the rhizome? What happens to the old growth? Can you just throw it away, or is it?
So it's still classed as hazardous waste. So there are a number of ways of dealing with it. We can literally come along, cut it all off and take it away. The other option, and a lot of people actually go for this, is we say, look, if you want to get a metal bin, you know, it burns really quickly. Just have a little fire in a metal bin and burn that top growth in a metal bin, and then just spread the ash back where the plant was. And that's a really nice way of the client saving a little bit of money and us working with them rather than charging them, because it's still classed as hazardous waste, so we still get charged, and therefore that has to be then passed on to them.
So the herbicide, does it just act on contact?
Yes.
So it's not going to contaminate the soil and prevent other growth?
The glyphosate-based one is, it gets neutralised on contact with soil, it gets neutralised on contact with water. So that's again why it's so important that you do it on a dry, sunny day. It really gets, you can tell it's been sprayed when it's been sprayed on a wet day, but the effect is nowhere near, it's not even 50% of what it should be. So really you're wasting your time and chemical, and that's not good practice. Which, that said, we do prefer to inject. It takes longer, but we find that the plant definitely is affected by the plant far better than just spraying. If it's an old stand or plant, then we normally inject and then spray as well, almost a double dosage.
Excuse me, as a matter of good practice while you're doing that work, injecting, do you mark each stem afterwards to make sure you've got every single one?
Got every single one. That is good practice, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, it depends. If there's only a couple of dozen stems, then absolutely not necessary. You know, if you've got half a brain cell, if you're doing hundreds or sometimes even thousands of stems, we did one commercial one and there was literally thousands of stems. And yeah, that is absolutely because otherwise you come back after your coffee break at 11 o'clock and it's like, where was I? Any other questions before? Go on, gentlemen. Yeah, at the back.
You know the insurance?
Yeah.
Is that a cost every year, or do you just pay a one-off fee?
So how we do it for our clients is we give them basically a turnkey solution. So the price on the quote is the only price they'll pay. So in an ideal world, and that will include all of the treatment, all of the paperwork, and the insurance back guarantee. Now for us, I will add the caveat, if the person changes house, there's an administration charge to change because the insurance company charges us to change the policy into the name of a new person. But other than that, it is a set price. So there is no extra cost. So let's say we do the treatment, it goes really well. 3 years later, we're declaring the site free of Japanese knotweed. And then out of the blue, 3 years later on, it pops back up, just appears. And it's like, oh my goodness, it's come back. You pick up the phone, Kai answered the phone, one of the girls in the office, and she'll be like, yeah, no problem, found you, no problem, Mrs. Smith. We'll have somebody out in the next 2 weeks, or whenever is appropriate. Might even be quicker than that. And that whole process then has to start again. But there is no additional cost to the client. They've already paid their fee, and that's guaranteed for the next 10 years. So there is no cost to the customer, which is why, again, we like to, I said at the very, very beginning, customer service is really important to us. It is, because this is something that really does stress them out. We had a lady up in Chester, an old lady, she'd lost her husband the year before. I got a phone call on a Sunday afternoon, it was about 2:15, I remember it so clearly, because she was in tears on the phone to me, literally crying. She'd read an article in the morning in the Daily Telegraph about Japanese knotweed. She'd gone into a garden and she'd identified Japanese knotweed in a garden. She was already struggling financially because her husband had died, and she just, she'd read that this can devalue your house by 50%. That typically it can cost anything between £5,000 and £20,000, and she was absolutely devastated. She thought this was it. I'm going to move out of my home that I've been there for the last 20 plus years with my husband. Her life was coming to an end as far as she was concerned. I spoke to her for over half an hour, almost 45 minutes on the phone, trying to calm her down, and said, look, I will come out first thing tomorrow morning. I'll be there for 8 o'clock in the morning. Please, please do not worry. It quite often gets misidentified. You're comparing it off pictures. It might not even be Japanese knotweed. And if it is, then we'll sort it for you. Don't worry. We'll make sure we get it sorted for you. And by the end of the conversation, she was a little bit calmer. She certainly wasn't crying. I got there early, actually. I got there just before 8 o'clock, 7:45, and she was waiting literally at the door for me. And we went in, we had a look, and I said, so where do you think your Japanese knotweed is? Because I'm scanning the garden, I can't see anything. She's here, and she'd done some digging, and there was some roots there. It's like, what makes you think it's Japanese knotweed? Well, it's got the yellow tinge, because Japanese knotweed has a yellowy orange tinge to the root. Yeah, it does. Anything else? No, I think that's it. And she got out a plastic bag, and these are the roots she dug up. It was the roots of a berberis. It took me all about 20 seconds to work out what they were. She was obviously delighted, but it's so easy for people to get so worked up. Their prized possession can be devalued by tens of thousands of pounds just like that because of a silly plant in the garden. So, and we even had one case where the person's mother had planted the Japanese knotweed about 40 years ago. And she'd bought it and literally planted it in the garden, which obviously the daughter was not over the moon when she inherited the house and realised that it was such an issue. But yeah, it's so important that when we're dealing with it, it is dealt with in a balanced manner.
You mentioned berberis there.
Yeah.
What's it most commonly misidentified with? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, there is. There's loads of plants that it's misidentified as. Probably the very most common one is Rumix arbustiflorus, commonly known as docks. When you get a nettle sting, you rub the dock leaf on your hand.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. It's not the leaf. The flower spike off the dock stands about 2.5 feet tall and looks almost identical to the flower spike, the dead stem of Japanese knotweed, just like a young version, a small version. So in the winter, we actually get quite a few surveyors who misidentify it, but that's okay. We get to charge to go out and tell them it's not.
Because that goes well, Chris, be like a drive back, Knotweed stem, I guess.
Absolutely, it really does. Yeah, it does. It looks so.
Yeah.
I actually went to one near Swadlincote, and I walked into the garden. Said, yeah, this is a misidentification. It wasn't a surveyor, it was the actual client who was worried that he thought he'd got Japanese knotweed, the person selling the house, and walked around. Yeah, no, this isn't Japanese knotweed. He then comes out with a cup of coffee for me, drink it and says, no, it's not Japanese knotweed. He goes, but it looks exactly like it. It looks exactly like it. I said, no, it's not. Let me show you. We pulled some up, snapped it, showed him, pulled up the root. You can see, actually, here's the leaves just coming through. Walked over to another section, pulled it up, and then, let me just show you. Oh. And I scraped all the soil away and poured it, snapped it. It sounds like a carrot when it snaps. Nice orange. I'm really sorry, mates. You've got Japanese knotweed in this corner. That bit isn't. None of that is. And I must admit, I was ready to walk off because and that's me with 20 plus years of experience.
Yeah.
And it was literally 25 odd square by 25, one plant in amongst all of this other weeds. And that was about 2 months ago, so it literally hadn't even started growing yet, but there was just a little dead stem, and it looked identical, for all intents and purposes, to the docks that were growing everywhere else in his garden. But yeah, so it is really easy. If I can, and I'm looking for it all the time, then it is really easy to miss it. There was somebody else moved. No? Happy? Cool. So Rick's guidelines, so obviously, again, you know this better than I do, about making sure that you look not only in the garden, but also from first floor level. We've talked about taking pictures, it's really important that. What do you do if it's a big garden there? Say it's an acre garden. Because I know you guys don't have unlimited time to do surveys. You can't just do one survey and call it a day and then go home. You might have 3, 4, 5, or even more maybe to do in a day.
I think the important thing is where it is nearer to structures. I mean, if it was a quarter of a mile away from the building,
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same relevance. You still got to probably identify it.
Yeah.
But, it is where it does danger that is where it does harm is where we've got to know how to deal with it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The key measurement is 7 metres within habitable space. So habitable space is defined as any proper permanent structure, so a garage, a conservatory, not just the main residence, not just the main house. It doesn't include things like sheds, but it does include any permanent structures like a brick-built garage or a brick-built shed somewhere. The 3 and 4 are the key ones really. That's when things really do need to happen. But the example you just said, that would be maybe number 2, where it's more than 7 metres from habitable space, but it's within the boundary, definitely, or even on the other side of the boundary. This is again, there are no solicitors in the room. You'll be grateful. But just have a read of that. Okay. Absolutely. This is definitely the new thing. So when you used to have the ambulance chasers, or it was the insurance on the your loans, this is the new thing for solicitors. No question about it. We are getting a significant amount of inquiries from solicitors who are looking to sue people for Japanese knotweed. And the 2 most common people that they're looking to sue are Network Rail, because there's already been a case for that, and surveyors that have missed it. It's rare that they go after the previous owner, but they do if there's evidence to support it. But the 2 that they go after is Network Rail if it backs onto a Network Rail, and obviously Network Rail have got the biggest number of neighbours as any landlord in the UK. So they're a real soft spot for solicitors to go after, but it is surveyors that they look to, and obviously your professional indemnity insurance. So it is really important that you cover yourselves, and we're going to talk about how you can cover yourselves. There's a number of legislations that relate specifically to Japanese knotweed, designating it as not only a controlled waste, but also how you can be guilty if you... It's an interesting phraseology there, because that's been argued in court as well. Grow in the wild. How do you define the wild? Is a garden, a cultivated garden, the wild? It's been argued both ways. That no, it isn't, and yes, it is. This is actually probably quite a nice point to talk about the case. So Network Rail was sued by Mr. Wastrel, unfortunate name, I'm afraid. And basically he was sued for, they'd got Japanese knotweed growing along their embankment. His property, his boundary line was the wall of his property, his bungalow. And basically, surveyor came along, said, your house is worth at least 30,000 less than market value because of the Japanese knotweed. Tries to sell his house, can't sell his house. Wants to move back to Spain, where he'd got a place there and just wanted to live there, live out his retirement in the sunnier climes, nicer sides, because it was in Wales. We all know that Wales doesn't really have any sunshine. There is somebody from Wales, isn't it? Somebody said they were from Swansea. 2 people from Swansea. And you as well. Oh no.
4 or 5 of us.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
You're right.
Right. So basically they sue Network Rail. The solicitor pays for the whole thing. He doesn't actually pay for it because and they win down in Cardiff High Court, or Crown Court I should say. They win the case. Network Rail is absolutely appalled by this because they've got obviously thousands and thousands and thousands of houses, tens of thousands of houses that back onto their property, and keeping in mind that Network Rail deliberately in the 1800s and early 1900s planted Japanese knotweed on their embankments to hold the embankments together. So they've literally got tens of thousands of homes that are affected by Japanese knotweed at the moment, just today, literally. So they're appalled by this. They then take it to the High Court and appeal it. They then lose at the High Court. Now, unfortunately, the judge, in my opinion, didn't give enough clarity as to what... But basically what he said was, if the rhizomes, it doesn't even have to be visible growth, have come from a neighbouring property onto your property, then that will affect the value of the property, affect the sale value, because on the valuation. And therefore, because every Englishman's home is his castle, and he has a right of enjoyment of his property, okay? Because even if there isn't Japanese knotweed on his property, if it's in the next door or adjacent land or property, and it's affecting his enjoyment, then there is a claim that can be made against that right of enjoyment. So what we've now found is solicitors are looking at it in 2 ways. They're looking at, is the rhizomes or is the visible growth that's come onto the client's property from a neighbouring property? And they go after that. Literally a simple devaluation of property. If it's in the neighbouring property and it hasn't come in, they then talk about, and it's almost laughable, stress. I can't possibly go into my garden and have a barbecue because I know the Japanese knotweed's there and it just upsets me so much, so I can't enjoy my garden. So it's a lack of enjoyment, a lack of being able to enjoy the garden. So again, this really, for you guys here, particularly in the room, it emphasises the importance of not only looking at the client's garden, but those neighbouring gardens. And that's why it's so important to look at that. It really is. And it's how do you negate the risk? If you have any doubt in your mind at all that there's potentially Japanese knotweed in that garden, you need to put something in your report. And it needs to basically say something on the lines of, there was a suspicious plant, or there was a plant that resembles Japanese knotweed. And we talked about dock leaves resembling Japanese knotweed. Convolvulus is another one, because the flowers are identical, almost. It's in the same family, it's just, it doesn't affect properties at all. And the leaf is a smaller version of the leaf. So again, very, very similar, quite often gets misidentified as Japanese knotweed. But we've also had Syringium macrophylla and microphylla lilac misidentified as Japanese knotweed when the young plant's coming up because they grow quite quickly, and the leaf again is similar, not identical, and we can easily identify the difference, but you guys aren't botanists. You're not expected to be botanists. So if there's any doubt in your mind, you need to put something in that report that says, basically, even if it's a large garden, you know, you could even say it's a large garden with a significant depth in the borders of shrubs, and there could be Japanese knotweed at the back of one of these borders. Or there is if you think, you know what, there is a plant there, and it looks like Japanese knotweed to me, but I'm just not sure. You don't have to identify it personally, but you just need to put in that report, there's a plant there that looks like Japanese knotweed. We recommend an expert in Japanese knotweed comes and surveys the entire garden. And then you're covered, because you're doing everything you should as a professional surveyor. Because your primary responsibility is obviously the house and structural in the house, isn't it? And that's really important. And that would probably be the one key thing. If you take nothing away from this, think about a phrase that you can put into you.
How do building insurers view the claim against the surveyor?
Yeah.
The people who insure the property for the client in terms of the cost of the work? Will they?
So just run that past me again.
The building insurers for the property that's affected, how do they perceive the responsibility of the surveyor who's missed the presence of knotweed? So the client going to his building insurer saying, it's going to cost me £10,000 to...
They'll turn around and say it's not covered.
It's not covered.
As far as we're aware,
Yeah.
we aren't aware of any building insurers that cover
So it's an exemption on the policy.
Japanese knotweed,
Yeah.
unless it has physically caused structural damage, whereupon obviously it would then come under that. It would be structural damage to the
So it's down to the
property.
surveyor then.
Yeah, yeah. Because remember, believe it or not, even though there's this hoo-ha about Japanese knotweed, it's rare that it causes damage unless the house has been empty for a period of time.
Yeah.
This is almost a perceived devaluation of the property. But just because it's perceived doesn't make it not real. You know, if you've got your really sad case up in Stoke actually, couple, early 30s, marriage gone to the wall, decided to part ways. Really, thankfully, no children involved. House, £250,000. They'd got about £100,000 worth of capital in the house, so they've done quite well, really. And then surveyor comes along and says, actually, your house isn't worth 250,000; it's worth 150. I'm only valuing it at that because of the Japanese knotweed. Also, all of a sudden, that, you know, they've lost the £100,000 worth of capital, and it's like, how do they start a new life with, well, basically with zero? So, what it is, thankfully, we were able to come in. We were able to do a treatment plan, management plan, and yes, they lost, I think, about 15 grand off the value, the true value or of the house. Which, but losing 15 grand is a lot better than losing 100,000. Absolutely, but it's very rare that I don't know any examples of where the home insurance have covered the cost of remediation if there's been no structural issues. We said we'd talk about financial benefits. The best example we've got of this is a case in London. I already spoke to you about the guys in Crewe that look for houses for Japanese knotweed. This gentleman was buying a lovely Victorian 5-storey terraced, wanted to put a 2-storey basement in the bottom. You know, the whole thing, swimming pool, gym, that type of thing. The type of thing they do only in London. Probably quite jealous, really. So it had got Japanese knotweed in the garden. The issue with the garden was it was 2 flights of stairs below ground level. So you literally had to go down one flight and then down another flight to get to the garden. It was completely enclosed by other gardens, walled gardens, and the only access was through the house. He wanted it excavated because he wanted it gone. And he came and said, how much will it cost me? I haven't bought the house yet. Can you go and survey it? So we went out, we surveyed it. And I said, well, the problem is we don't know how much the roots are going to be there. It could be 1 metre, it could be 2 metres, it could be up to even 3 metres deep, and most of the garden could be covered because it's only there are only small gardens in London. It was near the centre. And I said, I worked it out. I said, worst case scenario, you're looking at £120,000 to dig it out. And He goes, well, that's a lot of money. I says, well, you asked me what the price was. If you want me to quote it, it could be that much money. So he goes to the person selling it, says, I'm reducing my offer by £120,000. And the reason why is this. And he showed them our report, showed him the quote, and the people just accepted it. And he bought the house. He then phoned us up about 2.5 months, almost 3 months later, and said, right, bought the house now, you need to come down and get it done. How much is it going to cost me? And I said, well, it's going to cost you what I told you it could cost you. It depends on how much we have to dig out. It could cost you up to £120,000. He goes, well, I don't want to spend that much money. I was like, until we dig it out, I don't know how much it's going to cost you. He says, well, so we basically agreed a price per tonne. And he would supply the labour. He was somehow connected to a building company. So I arrived the first day, 7 o'clock in the morning, and there's these 6 poles that are there. And I tell you what, they were built like something else. They were fantastic guys. And we dug it out by hand, into rubble sacks, up 2 flights of stairs, into a skip that was then taken away to a licensed landfill site. And it was such hard work. We only ended up having to go to about 1.3 metres deep. On the left-hand side, it had already been excavated by the neighbour, and the neighbour had put in a brand new retaining wall with a barrier, so it hadn't gone into the wall or any further than that, which was great. And then we hit a clay pan, and the Japanese knotweed had just stayed in basically the sandy loam soil, and once it hit the clay pan, it moved along that. So we only had to dig out. I think it ended up being about 23.5 tonnes. I know it was because it killed me. Trying to just keep up with these guys. And it ended up costing him 20 grand, plus the VAT, and a bit of loose change. He was delighted, because he'd just saved 120,000 on his purchase of his house. So there is absolutely no reason at all why a property that is affected by Japanese knotweed should not be purchased. So much so that 4 years ago we bought a commercial building ourselves with Japanese knotweed less than 1 metre away from the foundation. And we were happy to do that. Yeah, we negotiated on the price. We got it 20 grand cheaper. And now there is no Japanese knotweed on that side because I've treated it. We've treated it. So if we sold it in another couple of years, we'd be able to get full market value for it. So that is also something that's really, people often phone up, again, you guys are surveyors, it's Japanese knotweed, I'm going to walk away. Well, just hold on. There's no actual need to walk away. You might want to negotiate on the price of it, but there's no reason at all why you shouldn't buy that house if that's the house you want. Something that we do is, obviously we guarantee our work for 10 years. That's also backed with a 10-year insurance-backed guarantee as well. Although we've been established for over 20 years, it's something that the mortgage companies insist on. And to be honest, again, it's another level of comfort for the client, that they've got a 10-year insurance-backed guarantee. Now what that covers is, if we go bump, that insurance pays another company to treat that Japanese knotweed. So that's a nice policy to have, and a nice bit of extra assurance for the client. It's easy to say we're the most professional and proactive. I like to think we are. The fact that the office is open 6:45 till 5, Monday to 5:30 Monday to Thursday, and 6:45 till 5:30 on a Friday, should I say. But then after office hours, it diverts through to either mine or the other director's mobile. So we are literally available to our clients all the time, or potential clients. So if you are doing a survey on a Saturday, you will be able to get hold of somebody, especially if you need to know, is that Japanese knotweed or isn't it? So that's the last slide, guys. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Go for it.
How effective is the injection or the treatment of the leaves?
Yeah.
And how often do you have to go back and retreat it?
Right, so typically 10 visits over a 3-year period. For most sites, we're able to eradicate it in year 1. If it's 10 years old or more, it nearly always takes at least 2 years. And so far, we've eradicated all of our jobs. So some of them, the most difficult one we ever had went into year 3. So it took us 3 years of spraying and injecting to kill it, and that's just gone past its 2-year mark, where there's been no Japanese knotweed come back from that. But normally a year to 18 months. But It's probably longer for maybe some of the other companies. Over the last 20 years, we've perfected our own methodology. So that's not only the concentration of herbicide, it's when to apply it, it's how to apply it, it's even, as I said earlier, taking into account things like the weather, temperature, all of that type of stuff, just to make sure all of the factors are exactly how we want them, all the boxes are ticked, so that there's maximum absorption of the herbicide. Gentlemen at the back.
Without my surveyor's hat on, I do private building control
Okay.
works. What's the stance if I'm going on a site and they've started on an excavation and the garden's overgrown? Have I got a duty to be looking for knotweed, or could that potentially stop the building work from progressing with foundations? Or who would? So I've got a site, it's an overgrown garden, they're digging out for a footing for an extension.
Okay,
I said there's knotweed a couple of metres away.
right.
I wouldn't be expected to be looking for it, would I, as a
Wow.
building control, or
Okay.
potentially under the building regulations?
So let me give you an example of a building site that we went on to. And I don't know how, and you tell me how this relates to you and your role.
Yeah.
We went onto a building site because the bank had withdrawn all their funding. So what had happened was the bank's representative had gone out, they were partway through a build of, I think it was 4 houses at the end of a cul-de-sac, and the builder had had complete disregard, and he fully was aware there was Japanese knotweed at the end of the site, and he'd ran his diggers, his dumpers, everything through it, bulldozed it all. What he'd done is he'd tried to push most of it onto the council land. So he literally but then he hadn't bothered cleaning tyres, wheels or anything, and he tracked around his site. There was Japanese knotweed coming up next to the buildings, there was Japanese knotweed in the front, there was Japanese knotweed where the main entrance was meant to be, it was all on the back, all little plants. So we knew it hadn't been, the whole site hadn't been covered, we knew it had literally been pulled in, and it was everywhere. The bank came in just to do a bit of a check, yeah, everything going okay, before we released the next set of funding, saw the Japanese knotweed and pulled all the funding, there and then. 18 months later, there has not been another brick built on that site. And they've told him he needs to sort it all out. We've told him what needs to be done, but nothing's happened. We haven't got the job, and as far as we're aware, he hasn't had anybody else to do it. So, should you be looking for Japanese knotweed? Yes. If it's within 2 or 3 metres of the foundation, I would be concerned. I would be saying, look, either the Japanese knotweed needs to be fully excavated, and even if it's kept on site, and then dealt with maybe in another corner of the site. It was a big site. We did a job for St Modwins where we shifted over 100 tonnes, but it was a massive site, and we literally shifted it to a corner that wasn't going to be developed, and we literally then treated that for the next 2 years. And that was fine. So they were able to carry on with what they were doing, putting a road in and everything.
So the work would stop though while the treatment process was ongoing?
Not necessarily treatment, because treatment obviously is chemical. Now, if you're saying it's only 3 metres away in this, well, the roots are probably, they're digging through the roots, so where's that soil being deposited? Because if it's been taken off site...
If nobody's identified, you see, as knotweed, it'll just go general waste in a skip and
Of course it will.
to landfill or wherever,
Yeah.
a normal route.
If you remember a slide earlier, talks about £20,000 fine
Yeah.
for a company for cross-contamination. So they need to watch themselves if they were going to do that. I certainly would not recommend that. There are other ways around it. We've got a job where they didn't want to go, well, they couldn't really go for the excavation because it was right in the corner and it was affecting 2 other people's gardens. So if we dug it out from theirs, it would have still come in from the other 2 people's gardens. So what we've done on theirs is we've put a membrane in basically around the house, and it sat underneath the foundation, came up the side of the foundation, and literally protected the entire house. And then we're doing a treatment program on the Japanese knotweed. So house is completely protected.
Yeah.
Great, and the treatment carries on of the Japanese knotweed.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah. I'm slightly confused with the idea of just taking this stuff, digging it out and taking it to landfill.
Yeah.
Because even if you're taking it to a licensed tip,
Yeah.
aren't you effectively allowing it to grow in the wild by taking it there?
Right, so it has to be licensed, and they don't just put it on a pile, cover it with a bit of topsoil. So what they do is yeah, absolutely. So they will do one of 2 things with it. They will sort it, basically put it through a massive sieve, effectively, like a vibrating plate, so the rhizome, and then they will hand pick up the rhizome and burn it, highly unlikely they'll do that, but they can do it. What they normally do is they dig a big hole, normally about 5 metres deep, and then they put a membrane over the top of it. And then they put between 2 and 5 metres of clean soil on top of that. So, and that stops it. The membrane has to be guaranteed for 50 years. So yeah, that's how they do it.
Do you regard Himalayan balsam the same way as Japanese knotweed?
If you look in the brochure, it's got it down there as an invasive weed. Hugely different thing. You know, my 8-year-old can get rid of Himalayan balsam. It pulls out nice and easy, as I'm sure you guys know. It's got the pretty pink flower, and as 98% of the seed will germinate in year 1. So as long as you trim it off or pull it out before it goes to seed, the chances are you only have to do that for 1 full year, and then it's gone. And because it pulls out nice and easily, then it, and also, even if it was all over the garden, surrounding the property, it shouldn't make any difference to the value of the property, because it will never, ever affect the value. It'll never affect the foundation. Never. You know, the roots are like 2 or 3 inches deep. JJ's looking at me. Are we there?
Yeah, we're there.
We're there. Cool. Okay. Thank you ever so much for your help.